question that comes up quite regularly: what do I do if there's a mistake in the tax return? And this also actually came up in this particular tax cafe in a question regarding to VAT, where the VAT question was formulated a little bit differently in the sense that it asked, why is it that I can only put in a request for correction if there's VAT due? Why can't I do a request for correction if there's input VAT which should have been declared and is not? Right. And the simple answer is that this has to do with the way that the Tax Administration Act is actually designed. Right. And the Tax Administration Act, and here also I'm going to say, please have a look at Nico Tarun's very, very good series on tax administration and the varying responsibilities and issues that you have with it, is to recognize the fact that the law is designed with a number of different remedies in place, but those remedies give us varying rights and they have different terms and conditions that apply to it. So the main sections that we'd be dealing with here are Chapter 9, which deal with our objections and appeals process, and then it is Section 93 through to Section 100, which deal with revised estimates, additional estimates, essentially jeopardy assessments and prescription. The long and the short of it is the way our Tax Administration Act works is that there's the presumption from the legislature that the taxpayer is the person who holds all the cards, in the sense that you've got all the information, you have the whole fiscal year to deal with it. You should be able to put the information together and get it right, because ultimately that's your responsibility. So you do need relief to deal with situations where you believe SARS has done something wrong, but by the same token, you shouldn't need extensive relief to deal with scenarios where you made errors on your tax return, because ultimately that is something which was under your control. Whereas from SARS's point of view, they aren't as intimately au fait with your financial affairs. So for them to pick up errors, they need a little bit of time. So the way the Tax Administration Act works is that from the date your assessment is issued, if it is an assessed return like income tax, or if it's not an assessed return, then from the day that you submit your return for things like VAT, PAYE, dividends tax, those kinds of things, then your timer starts running from the day you submit the return. Then you're effectively at a point where you enter into your Chapter 9 objections and appeals timeframes. And as far as I'm concerned, I believe that window is still too narrow, but that's a discussion for a different day. Okay. So from that point of view, I do believe we could make it still more helpful for the taxpayer. But the bottom line is, while I'm in the objections and appeals timeframe, while I'm in that window which the law allows us, which is the 30-day with an additional 21-day extension, if you believe there's an error in the return, either because you've misstated, because you've underclaimed expenses, or you think that you've overstated income, it doesn't matter which way around it goes. If there's a mistake, you can object, even if you're objecting to your own mistake. 100% totally entitled to do so. Objections and its appeals process, and SARS has to deal with the issue. So from a legal point of view, that objections and appeals timeframe is your strongest argument that you will always have, because that's when you have your biggest legal protections. You at that point can go to SARS and say, this is wrong, you must fix it. And that's also why it's so important from our point of view that when you believe there is an error, that you get it in the objection and appeals timeframe. look, I'll be the first person to admit it's not always possible, but that is where you have, as the taxpayer, your strongest and best legal rights to compel SARS to listen to you and to change the tax return. Okay. If you outside objections and appeals time frame, so that 30 plus 21 days time frame, then we've got a second window in which we still have rights, but they're not as strong as in the objection and appeals time frame. And that is up until our prescription period. So if for it's income tax, then it's from date of assessment. You've essentially got 61 days in which you're in objection and appeals time frame. After that, you've got up to 3 years from the date of the assessment where you're still within the prescription time frame. Now, while we're post the objection period, but we're pre-prescription, then I still have a few options. But these are, please, SARS, be kind to us and be generous, and I prostrate myself before you, and please work with me type options. They are not the objection option where it's not I prostrate myself before you, SARS, please listen to me. These options post the objections time frame are, please, SARS, by your agreement, can we please do something? And there's two ways in which we can, well, actually, sorry, I lied. There's 3 ways in which we can get into a correction for my return. The first one is if we go to SARS and ask for a condonation of a late objection. That we go to SARS and go and say, I actually should be objecting to this. Sorry, I missed my time frame. Here's my reasons why. Now, strictly speaking, in terms of the Tax Administration Act, there's very limited reasons under which SARS is actually allowed to grant late objections. There needs to be extenuating circumstances. And whoopsie, I forgot, or whoopsie, I had a terrible tax practitioner does not count. It needs to be illness, disability, sort of acts of God, that kind of thing, in order for it to really count. So if you're getting condemnations put through for reasons other than one of those 3, consider yourself lucky and just run with it. Okay. So that's option 1. Your next 2 options are really your request for correction. Now, a request for correction is not strictly speaking written into the Tax Administration Act, but it comes from Section 93. And Section 93 does say, if you're outside of your objections and appeals timeframe and you find an undisputed error in your tax return, either as a result of you having done something silly or SARS having done something silly, then you can put through a Section 93 request to get the amount changed. But a Section 93 request requires approval or agreement from both the taxpayer and SARS in order for it to be processed. And what SARS has just done is said from a policy point of view that they will accept Section 93 requests where it results in additional taxes payable without putting in any additional work. And that's actually the request for correction button. It's where SARS has said in default, we agree, and we agree wholeheartedly. If you're going to pay us more money, we'll agree to the error. Whatever it is, we'll agree. That doesn't mean that if the error swings the other way, that Section 93 isn't available to you. It just means it's a harder slog to get SARS to approve to approve it, because what it means is you actually have to put in a Section 93 request to go and say, hi, I believe there's an error on this tax return. It's not an objection, but it's a Section 93 request for an error, and can you please fix it? And generally what SARS will fix or accept as an error under Section 93 are things like if the IT12, for example, or the IT14 was broken and it added something up incorrectly, or if it didn't pull through a particular expense line item, or, if on the statement of account a number didn't pull through, or, so basically something where there's a pure computational error, they will not accept differences in interpretation on a tax item. So, for example, if you captured your numbers on the form and you transposed a 2 and a 3, you can go to SARS and say, whoops, sorry, I just switched 2 numbers around. Can we please fix that? That SARS will accept. But you going, guys, you disallowed this expense but I believe it's valid because it related to X, Y, and Z for trade. That's not a error that they're thinking about in terms of Section 93. So that's your first option. There is an additional item which has come through, and that's a pretty recent addition that was from the beginning of the year, which says that and it's Section 95, basically, if what you're trying to object to is expenses that were disallowed because you didn't submit your documents, then once you've submitted the documents, you can, in terms of Section 95, go knock on their door and say, hi, I should have submitted these documents. I didn't. Please go fix it. But please note also again, Section 95 is only available up to prescription. Once you're outside of prescription, pretty much your only real option as a taxpayer that you have available is a VDP. And please bear in mind, a VDP implies that you owe taxes. What it means practically for us is that if you should have claimed an input and you didn't, and you fall into prescription, that's it. You actually have no legal recourse. So that prescription line item is an incredibly important one, and I think it's one that doesn't always get the attention it deserves.